Do you ever wish that life was a little more square? People tend to think of 6x6 as kind of like the ugly duckling of film photography, and you know what? I get it. These days, almost all of us are used to shooting 3x2 aspect ratio, and looking into the viewfinder of a 6x6 camera can make you think things such as, why are the edges of the frame missing, and can I have surgery on my eyes to make everything look like Hasselblad ground glass? For that reason, I think when a lot of people get into medium format film photography, they tend to either go for 6x4.5 since it's cheaper and closer to 35mm, or skip 6x6 entirely and go for 6x7, because film photography YouTubers are all part of a grand conspiracy by Big Mamiya to sell you more Mamiya 7s. I'll admit, I fell into both of those traps too. My first real medium format camera was the 645 Bronica ETRS, which I eventually sold because it felt too similar to shooting 35mm. After my mutual separation from the Bronica, I started a new relationship with a Pentax 6.7, and while we had fun, there was just something that was keeping me from fully committing. TLRs are probably the most iconic looking film cameras, and they all have some sort of spell cast on them that lures old people towards you to ask if you can still buy film these days. Yashica as a company made some pretty great cameras back in the day, less so these days, and their TLRs are particularly well known for being kind of a good budget alternative to fancy stuff like Rolleiflex. The most famous of these is probably the Yashica Mat 124G, but there's actually a whole range that have fairly similar features, including one called the Pigeon Flex, which... what was going on there? And also, where can I buy one? The Yashica 635 is so named because it can also shoot 35mm film in addition to medium format, using some adapters which I don't have. It has a 35mm rewind and 35mm frame lines inside the ground glass. But we're not here to talk about 35mm, we're here to talk about the sexy square-shaped goodness that is 6x6 medium format. The biggest reason I think every film photographer should at least try shooting a TLR once is that shooting square forces you to think differently to any other camera. Composing shots in square format reduces you to a baby-like incompetence that makes you question if you've ever even held a camera before. Compositions that work well on other formats don't necessarily translate over to 6x6, so it's a fun challenge to force yourself to approach stuff differently. TLRs, and especially Yashica TLRs, offer some of the best bang for your buck in medium format cameras in general, not just for 6x6. The best thing about the camera is definitely the built-in 80mm Yashica lens. $80mm is a standard focal length for 6x6, and like pretty much all TLRs except those weird Mamiya ones, you can't swap the lenses out, so you are stuck with the 80mm. But to be honest, you won't want to swap the lenses out because this lens is amazing. It's incredibly sharp, even wide open at 3.5, and I honestly think this might be the sharpest lens I've ever used. The Yashica lens also has a bit of that cool swirly bokeh look that had every amateur filmmaker buying up every Helios lens they could back in 2016. TLR, if you don't know, stands for Twin Lens Reflex Camera because unlike pretty much every other camera on Earth, they have two lenses, one for framing your image and one for taking the image. This does introduce a slight amount of discrepancy between what you frame and what the final image is, but to be honest, I've only ever really had it be an issue at really close focus distances. This camera is so fun to me because it forces me to shoot completely differently to any of my other cameras. Using a TLR is totally different to using an SLR or a rangefinder or a modern digital camera. 6x6 also gets you 12 shots on a roll of medium format film, which, what with film prices going to the moon, is pretty nice. With other medium format cameras like the Bronica and the Pentax, I ended up shooting them quite similarly to how I would shoot 35mm, but with a TLR, you're just forced to use it in a different way. I think that's good. It forces you to be creative in a new way and take photos that you otherwise wouldn't have.